You may ask, why do we want to raise this king, queen, and Polk shoes? Whenever you're picking the hands to bluff in this spot, you want to ideally block your opponent's most obvious continuing hands. Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little. I hope you're having a fantastic day. We're going to continue going through hands from the 200-400 Cadillac of Poker battle between Doug Polk and Daniel Negreanu. They're playing 200-400 no limit, Texas style, not Omaha style. And here we have Daniel Negreanu opening it up to $1,000 with ace-jack offsuit. Doug Polk 3 bets the king-queen offsuit. Daniel Negreanu 4 bets. 4 bets the ace-jack offsuit, and then Doug Polk calls. All of this preflop action is standard enough. You're going to find that you should use a somewhat mixed strategy with the ace-jack when it comes to 4 betting or calling, but perfectly fine action from both players preflop. If you are ever confused about heads-up preflop poker, we have some charts available for you completely for free. Check out pokercoaching.com/HUNL to get them. All right, flop comes ace, 2, 2. Doug Polk checks. Daniel Negreanu, continuation bets. Nice and easy spot. Pretty standard spot to go for a continuation bet. As we see here, Negreanu's ace-jack offsuit opts to continuation bet the majority of the time. The red color is bet, green color is check. The gray color is not in your range because we would have played it differently. I don't exactly know what strategy these players are using 200 big blinds deep, but as you can see, we have them 4-betting just all of the best hands. A little bit of the decently strong hands, like, well, ace-jack offsuit, and then a small smattering of bluffs. Who knows what they're actually doing, but it's probably something like this. So anyway, as we see, ace-jack uses a small bet size, 20% pot, the vast majority of the time. As you see, most of the aces are betting, and then a lot of the bluffs are betting. A lot of just the nonsense is betting. Because in this scenario, if you can get your opponent to fold out anything, it's a pretty good success. Back over to Doug Polk. What do you do with the king-queen? Obviously, you don't know Negreanu has the ace-jack. Take a second, think about it. Do we just fold immediately to the small bet? Do we call? Do we raise small? Or do we raise big? Take a second, consider it. You know what you can do? Type it in the comment section below. Doing this is going to go a long way to helping you improve your poker skills because you are here in this video actively thinking and actively learning, and that's going to help you get better at poker. This is actually what I teach at pokercoaching.com. We have over 1,000 interactive quizzes where you have to say what you would do at every single point in the hand to ensure that you are improving your skills. You then get real-time feedback after every single action from my group of world-class pros, and you'll get a whole lot better at poker. I know I sure have since I've started learning from all the other coaches as well. So anyway, very cool spot. The king of clubs here is definitely a relevant card. This is a spot where Doug Polk has 2 reasonable options. He can either call or raise. And this is a spot where Doug Polk does opt to go for the raise. If we come over here and we take a look at Doug Polk's strategy, we see this king-queen usually either calls or, well, mostly folds. So when it's folding, it does not have the king of clubs. With the king of clubs, he should be sticking around with his hand, and often he is raising about 20% of the time with it and calling most of the other time in this scenario. You may say, why would you even stick around with the king-queen here? And the reason we're sticking around with the king-queen on ace 2-2 is because we actually beat a lot of Negreanu's bluffs. And if we go back in here and look at his bluffs, notice he has a little tiny bit of a bunch of these junky hands, and you are beating the vast majority of all of these little junky hands. And also against pocket jacks or pocket tens, you have outs, right? Against pocket nines, pocket eights, you have outs to make the best hand. So this is certainly not a great scenario for Doug Polk to be in, but with the club, it is reasonable to raise some portion of the time. I think when I looked it up, it was about 20% of the time you raise with the king of clubs and the queen. And that's all fine and good, and this is a pretty reasonable hand to bluff with. However, I think from watching Doug Polk play these matches, he may be raising in this spot substantially more than 20% of the time. And if he's raising in this spot substantially more than 20% of the time, that's going to allow Negreanu to just print money with all of his bluff catchers, like this ace-jack. At this point, against a GTO opponent, you probably want to just call with the ace-jack in Negreanu's shoes, as he does. Notice here, ace-jack calls literally every time. Pretty much no raising, right? The blue color here, by the way, is fold. So we have red is raise, green is call, blue is fold, gray is not in range, because we played it differently earlier. So anyway, we see the ace-jack calling, and you see mostly calling in this scenario, right? It's kind of interesting to see that he is calling 60% of the time against this raise. Really only you're folding out under pairs. Any ace, you stick around, of course. Kings, queens, you have to call the check raise. I know that feels a little bit dirty for a lot of people, but this is a spot where I think you should stick around a lot. You see all these random suited hands that are calling are all flush draws for the most part. So neat scenario. You may ask, why do we want to raise this king, queen, and Polk shoes? Whenever you're picking the hands to bluff in this spot, you want to ideally block your opponent's most obvious continuing hands, right? And if you think about Negreanu's most obvious continuing hands in this scenario, let's go over here and look at it. He's going to continue with ace-king, which the king blocks. Makes it harder for Negreanu to have ace-king. You want to block ace-queen, which the queen blocks, right? And you also want to block pocket kings and pocket queens. And notice, Doug Polk's king-queen blockers make it less likely that Negreanu has ace-king, ace-queen, pocket kings, or pocket queens. And if you look at this, that is the vast majority of his continuing range, which is why the king-queen does opt to bluff sometimes. The blockers here are very, very irrelevant. Plus, if he does have, jacks or tens, you have outs every once in a while. All right, turn comes jack of spades. Does Doug Polk continue bluffing? Well, if you've been paying attention to this match, he enjoys to continue bluffing. He goes for a third pot bet, which is kind of neat. This is another spot where if we look at the solver, we see the king-queen mixes it up between betting and checking. You see it's only a tiny sliver of the king-queen now. It's mostly king of clubs with another card. And, king of clubs with the queen. And you see it is betting about a third of the time, checking the rest. When it does bet, it does use a small bet size. When he's betting at all, he's using a small bet size. But it's important to note here that the vast majority of Doug Polk's range should actually check, which is kind of interesting, but it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Notice neither player has a 2 here, really. A lot of people look at this and say, oh, aren't we worried about the 2? No, we're not, because it's a 4-bet pot, right? So we're not really worried about 2s here. And in this scenario, when Negreanu bets the flop and then calls the raise, remember, what does his range look like? Well, any ace is just not going to fold, right? So all these are not going to fold. Flush draws are just not going to fold. Kings and queens may find a fold. Jacks is not going to fold. Tens will find a fold. But you see, that's like kind of it, right? There's really just not a whole lot of folding going on in this situation once it gets back around to Negreanu. As we see, kings does fold, queens call some portion of the time, which is kind of interesting. Probably has to do with the blockers. Ace-X never folds. Pretty interesting to see in Negreanu's shoes that ace-king, ace-queen, ace-jack, ace-8 randomly, ace-4 randomly. These hands opt to raise some portion of the time. I'm kind of surprised to see them raising. I would definitely venture to say that against someone who is overly aggressive, which, maybe Doug Polk is, maybe he isn't. It seems like he is to me, but maybe he's not. But against someone who is perhaps overly aggressive, you should definitely err on the side of calling, because if you know your opponent has too many bluffs in their range, you really, really, really want to keep them in with their bluffs. And especially if their bluffs are not mostly flush draws, then they're drawing thin to dead. And I realize here Polk does have 4 outs to the 10, but for the most part, he's going to be in just pretty bad shape here if he is bluffing with too many hands like random king of clubs. You may say, aren't we worried about the flush draws? Well, let's go back over here and take a look at Doug Polk's strategy on the flop. You see, when he's raising here, he's raising the aces, which makes some sense. Random under pairs, but really not a lot of flush draws. Take a look at this, right? We see like king jack with flush draw is only raising a tiny bit. Same thing, king 10, queen 10, jack 10. They're not raising every time. The raising range is 7% of hands, and he has jack 10 of spades 25% of the time he has this hand, right? So he's doing mostly calling with these flush draws. He's really only raising the weaker flush draws down here because they completely lack showdown value, but the higher flush draws he's doing mostly calling, and that's because if you raise all of your flush draws on the flop in Doug Polk's shoes, it makes it to where whenever the flush card comes after he check calls, he doesn't have any flushes, which is a big, big problem. So he has to mix up the way he plays flush draws, which means that a lot of Polk's bluffs here are actually drawing pretty thin. So anyway, on the turn, I think Negreanu should definitely call with all the aces. I would not raise here at all. This is a spot where if you think your opponent is over bluffing, you definitely do not want to blow them off the hand. Negreanu does call. River's at 7 of clubs. Flush card arrived. Seems like a pretty reasonable bluff spot for Doug Polk. Let's take a look at what the solver recommends. If we somehow get here, a tiny sliver of the time, almost never with king, queen, by the way, because we would have played it differently at all different points in this hand. It actually likes checking a lot of the time. Kind of bizarre. I would figure that this is a pretty good spot to bluff. This is a spot where I definitely would have screwed up and bluffed every time if I was in Doug Polk's shoes, if I did check raise flop and bet turn. Because you have the king blocker, right? You block the flush. But the problem with this is that Negreanu has some flushes. He also has some ace X, right? And if Negreanu's anywhere near competent, he's just not going to fold an ace. I mean, what is he even folding here? In this scenario, well, he actually should fold out ace, king, and ace, queen every once in a while, but he's mostly calling with all the other aces. If he has jacks, he obviously calls. This is a big portion of his range, interestingly enough. All the aces call for the most part. Flushes that he does have call. He's really just folding out like the weak ace X, the random low card floats that somehow are in this pot. And pretty tough spot here for Polk because he is going to get called a lot. And whenever you are going to get called a lot in this scenario, you just don't get to bluff all that often. So it's pretty neat to see, if we go back to Doug Polk's strategy here, that he really should not be bluffing the king-queen. Shocking to me that he should not be bluffing the king-queen. Ace-jack bets. These are mostly flushes in here. So flushes are betting. Ace-4 randomly bluffs, I guess, to try to get him off of the ace. And you block it. Kind of a weird hand there. Maybe these are mostly these are not flushes. Kind of cool to see that hand betting. Low pairs are opting to bluff because we really just don't have a lot of other bluffs. Weird spot, right? Weird spot. But anyway, at the end of the day, king, queen does not go for it for the most part. Negreanu has the easy call. And a giant pot is pushed towards Dale Negreanu. A big takeaway from this hand is that if you think your opponent may be over bluffing, as I think Negreanu probably thinks about Polk, and I probably think about Polk just given the way I've seen him play, which to be fair, I don't want to make it sound like over bluffing is necessarily bad. It could be a really good strategy if Negreanu is substantially over folding, which, you know, a lot of the small and medium pots have been going towards Doug Polk, and that's going to result in perhaps where a lot of his edge comes from. But if you do have the general idea that your opponent likes to bluff, when you do happen to have a really strong hand, you do not want to raise and blow them out of the pot. A lot of people in this spot on the turn for Dale Negreanu opt to just raise immediately and get all the money in. But notice, if on the turn, let's go back here to the turn, after Doug Polk's, if Polk bets, if Negreanu raises, yeah, he protects against some amount of outs, but in exchange for that, he makes it really, really hard for Polk to bluff. So when you are against someone who you think likes to bluff, call, keep them in the pot, and extract maximum value. So that's me it for today. I hope you enjoyed this hand. If you did, do me a favor. Click like, click subscribe. There's even a notification button if you want to be notified whenever I'm putting out more videos. So definitely do that. Good luck in the games. Have fun, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want more strategy lessons, pre-flop charts, and interactive quizzes, make sure you get your free membership to pokercoaching.com right now at pokercoaching.com/free. I'll talk to you next time.